down the street by Jumbo Dogs.
I call it Jumbo Dog. Botsford Drive-In, I think
Yeah,
is
Botsford.
official right now.
It's a little spot over there where their offices are, so please welcome to come over there and visit them. Their practice focuses on different areas, and I'm sure they'll pass this out, but the top few areas are bankruptcy, family law, criminal law, and workers' comp. So anything financial or business related, Ron handles, and family related, Kathy handles. So good morning once again. It's welcome to have you, and Ron, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Hi, good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to speak here to the Newtown Chamber, and I want to thank Mr. President, Tim Haas, and she's not here, but I want to also comment on Trish Farron and her whole team at Jantris. They are just fantastic. They are such a hard-working group, unbelievable. Yes, my name's Ron Bellenot, and Kathy and I do run a practice over there in the little blue Cape house next to the hot dog place, which is much more than a hot dog place, by the way. It's,
Oh, yeah, they do breakfast.
and they have the greatest milkshakes. I started, now what is that? What is somebody here who does, bankruptcies and foreclosures and criminal law, here to talk to you about business. And my topic really is 5 mistakes that business owners should never make. And I'm going to rely on Kathy to correct me if I'm wrong, and possibly Peter to correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not a tax expert, but tax has a lot of, to do with what I'm going to talk about today. Many years ago, back in 1990, I think it was, I started practice with a gentleman named Wallace Williams. I did criminal and civil litigation, was primarily what I did. He worked with building contractors, and they, mostly commercial building, little strip malls and small developments. And the economy really went bad then, similar to how it went bad here, 6, 7 years ago. We got out of it a lot faster, but houses were upside down. So he had these contractors, and that's how I got into foreclosures and bankruptcies and helping people in financial distress. The economy did get better, but I continued to do a lot of work for people who were suffering financial issues, even though the economy was good. And a lot of those were small business people, and their financial stress came from, many times, one of these 5 or 6 areas that I'm going to talk about today. This involves builders, painters, plumbers, landscapers, consignment shop owners, even accountants, realtors, commercial drivers, home health aides, private ones, and people who own services. So we'll start with the first thing that you should all do. And by the way, most of you probably do this right. So allow this to be a confirmation or reaffirmation that you're doing the right thing. So when you write that check to the workers' comp insurance carrier, you feel a little better about it, possibly. The first thing that you should always do, though, is incorporate. A lot of people don't incorporate. And if you have a landscaper, if you have a painter, somebody that comes by and does work for you, if you are, just ask them, are you incorporated? Because they should. Incorporating is essential to protecting your personal assets. If something goes wrong, somebody sues you, whether it's because they were injured, or you have a contract dispute, or anything else, or you damage their property when you're on at their home, or if they come to your facility, if you're driving and you're on business and you get in an accident, if you're incorporated, whether it's a C corporation or an LLC, they can go after your corporate assets, they can go after your business assets, which is bad enough, but they can't go after your personal assets. They can't go to your home, they can't take your bank accounts, they can't attach anything that you own personally, individually. So it's critical to incorporate, to protect. It's the greatest insurance in the world, to protect your personal assets. And if you are incorporated, the next most important thing to do is, or not to do, is don't break that corporate veil. Meaning, don't commingle your personal and your business assets. A lot of people do that. Somebody needs to pay their mortgage, they'll quickly write a business check out, send it to their mortgage company, or vice versa. Their business needs an infusion of cash, they'll take something and pay a bill for the business. Don't. Take a draw from your business, put it into your personal checking account, then send it off to the mortgage. Because if you break that corporate veil, now somebody who sues you or gets judgment or gets some kind of award against you can go to your personal assets, because there is no difference between you and the business when the business pays your personal expenses and vice versa. So never break that corporate veil. And not only will they go after your personal assets, but now the judgment can go against you personally also. So if you incorporate and somebody sues you and gets judgment, they'll have a judgment against your corporation, but it won't show up on your personal credit report. But if they sue you personally, it'll show up on your credit report also as a judgment. Workers' compensation is a big one. Never be caught without workers' compensation insurance if you have employees. Obviously, this is applicable to people who have employees. If you don't have workers' compensation insurance and somebody gets hurt, doesn't matter whose fault it is, doesn't matter if it's your fault, doesn't matter if it's their fault, nobody's fault. You don't have to do anything wrong, you're not negligent, they just get hurt on the job. You will be responsible if you don't have insurance for their medical bills, their out-of-work pay, mileage and transportation to and from their treatments, their physical therapy, the hospitals, possibly job retraining. If their injury is such that they can't go back to the work that they were doing, they might be entitled to job retraining. You'll pay sanctions, penalties, fines to the workers' comp, to the state of Connecticut. To give you a couple of examples of how really significant this can be, how devastating it can be to you individually. Even if you're incorporated, you individually, as the owner, will probably be responsible. We know of a case of a gentleman who was injured at work for a little small grocery store down in, I think, Bridgeport. I don't know if it's a convenience type store, but a small mom and pop grocery store. This is like 20 years ago he's injured. He's not able to go back to work. His injury is total and permanent. So for the last 20 years, they are weren't only responsible for, I don't know, was it maybe $100,000 in medical bills? Significant, over $100,000 in medical bills, significantly more than that. Plus at least $25,000 a year in out-of-work benefits. In the last 20 years, that's $500,000 there, plus all those medical bills. Plus they're responsible for his medical care for the rest of his life. They're responsible for his out-of-work benefits to retirement age, or do they get it forever? Forever, past retirement age, so they're gonna get paid past retirement age. Now the poor shop owner doesn't have that kind of money, he doesn't make that kind of profit. So what happens is the Workers' Compensation Commission has something called the Second Injury Fund. The state of Connecticut basically picks up and pays all of these expenses and these out-of-work benefits for this gentleman. But then the state of Connecticut's going after the shop owner. And they'll probably be going after him for the rest of his life. He's not gonna be able to own anything again in his name, and he's just gonna barely get by. That's the kind of devastation that can happen if you don't have workers' compensation insurance and you have an employee. Even if it's a temporary, one-day employee. I once represented a landscaper who went out to do his work one day, had a couple of commercial accounts, a big church, and they have shrubberies and stuff, and a teenage kid down the street, when he came out to go to work, asked him, hey, you need help today? So he said, sure, come with me. For whatever reason, teenagers being teenagers, he thought he'd trim the hedges with the lawnmower, so he picks up the lawnmower and lost the tip of a couple of his fingers. Now this is just, now this poor landscaper is responsible for his injuries and whatever permanent damage that might cause to him. Even though it was just a one-day thing, he brought him there that one day, he's not really a permanent employee or anything. So even if you just get help on a short-term basis, you need to have workers' compensation insurance. There's another case, and this again goes to show you how it doesn't matter who's at fault. We know of a case where there was a lady owned a trucking business, a small trucking business. And one of the drivers was driving a truck and I think had a medical condition or something while driving, ended up dying while he was driving the truck on the job, and she's responsible, because she didn't have workers' comp insurance, to his estate for his lost wages going forward. The next thing I'll talk about, Peter, you correct me if I'm wrong, is income taxes and payroll taxes. Make your quarterly tax payments, I know it's a hard thing, but if you don't, at the end of the year, you're gonna be paying interest and penalties. If you don't have enough money at the end of the year to pay those, the IRS can put a lien on you. They not only maybe put a lien on your home at town hall and the land records, but they can put just a general lien on you. That kind of is like an umbrella over all of your assets. They can go to your bank accounts and take money. They can, if you have another job where you get salary, they can pay your, touch your wages. So do that. But another important thing, and even more important, is if you have employees, pay the payroll taxes over to the IRS. Don't fail to pay the payroll taxes, because that can become a crime if you don't do that. And there's significant ramifications, obviously, if you end up in criminal trouble with the IRS or the state of Connecticut. Which leads me to another area that you want to be careful with, and that is sales tax. Never fail to pay over your sales tax. For whatever reason, I think the state of Connecticut comes after people more strongly for failing to pay over sales tax than they do income taxes or even payroll taxes maybe at times. It is a crime not to pay over sales tax. The Department of Revenue Services has a division called the Special Investigations Section, SIS. They are the law enforcement people within the Department of Revenue Services, and they initiate criminal sanctions against people. Because remember, if somebody pays you $100 for your product or your service, they have to give you $106 and cents now, change whatever the cents is. But that $6 isn't yours. You didn't earn that. That has nothing to do with your service, your product, or anything. That is sales tax. You are basically entrusted with taking that money from the purchaser and sending that money to the state of Connecticut. You are kind of like a trustee, a custodian of that money. It's not yours, never was yours. The $100 is yours, and you maybe end up responsible for taxes on it or something, for income taxes. But that $6 was never yours, so it's like stealing. It's like larceny if you don't pay that over to the state of Connecticut. Some of the penalties are, on the smaller levels, or some of the sanctions that they can do. They can revoke your permit to, your sales permit. They can suspend it. They can refuse to issue you a tax permit going forward. If you're operating, and if you don't have a permit, and you're operating without a permit, it's a Class C misdemeanor, which is kind of the lowest of crimes, but it's a crime, and it's something that will go on your record. You can go to jail for 90 days, have to pay a $500 fine for that. If you fail to pay over the sales tax, when you're supposed to pay over the sales tax, that becomes a more serious misdemeanor. That's a Class A misdemeanor. You can go to jail for a year and pay a $1,000 penalty on that. And if you commit a fraud, say you do fill in your tax return and you kind of fudge the numbers so you're paying less sales tax over to them, that is a Class C felony. You can go to jail for 5 years. You can pay a $5,000 penalty. It impacts you personally too, because they will now, I think for any felony, even if it's like a white collar type felony, they're going to take a DNA sample, put you into the DNA database, and anytime there's a serious crime committed, you will be out there in a database that they're going to look to see if you're involved. You'll lose your right to own a weapon. Not that I don't own a weapon, I don't like guns, but a lot of people do. You can lose your right to own a weapon and a gun, and at least for some period of time you can lose your right to vote. All because you try to fudge that tax return because maybe you thought you could save, keep some of that sales tax. And a lot of people do this, not intentionally. Some people just do it as an oversight. They're not paying attention, especially with, some of the, landscapers, some builders and stuff. They're just not good business people. If that's the case, they need to hire somebody to help them do it, because it doesn't matter if you do this unintentionally or not. If you don't pay it over, and you didn't pay the correct amount over, you could be caught into this crime. Then the next one can have multiple ramifications. The fifth, or the last of the areas I'm going to talk about, is kind of in the form of a question. Is he or she really a 1099 employee or independent contractor? And this is a big deal, because if you get caught, and it happens a lot of times, they do, and I've had to, that's why I'm speaking here, because not that I'm the tax expert, not that I'm the expert on, how to run your business, but I represented people in businesses who've made these mistakes over the last 24 years that I practiced. And this comes up over and over and over again. And I've seen cases where somebody's treated somebody as a 1099 independent contractor for 5+ years. They're responsible to go back and make up all of that payroll tax that they didn't pay. They're responsible for the Social Security, the Medicaid taxes, the state and federal unemployment taxes. They're going to pay penalties, serious penalties and interest to the government. And they're going to be in trouble with the workers' compensation. They're going to be fined and sanctioned because they probably didn't have workers' compensation on this person because they were treating him as a 1099 employee, or not employee, but independent contractor. On that note, real quick though, if you are responsible for the workers' comp insurance for an independent contractor or subcontractor, unless they send employees to work and they can prove that they already have coverage that protects them. So if an independent contractor works for you, you still are responsible to either provide them with the workers' comp insurance or make sure they're covered under some other policy for the work they're doing for you. How do you determine? If somebody's a 1099 independent contractor, what that basically means is that you control what the result's gonna be. You know, I want a shed put up over in that corner there, but you don't control how it's done, where it's done, you know, or the process that he uses to do it. You only tell them what they want the final result. You have no control over how it's done. That's basically what an true independent and then that's not all the cases either. Some of the ways they determine that is behavior. What control do you have over the way it's done? You're not really supposed to have any control over it. Some of it's financial. Do you reimburse them for their expenses? Do you pay any of their, expenses? Do you provide them with any insurance? Who provides them with the tools, the supplies, the materials that are needed to do the work? Those are some of the questions that the IRS and the state of Connecticut look at to determine if it's a wage W-2 employee or an independent contractor. The type of relationship too, is there written contracts between the two of you? Now, just because you have a written contract that identifies somebody as a 1099 independent contractor, doesn't necessarily mean that that's true, just because you say it is, and the two of you say it is. But that can help. How often do they work for you? Is this a one-time job they're doing for you? Do they do this regularly for you, almost like an employee would? Those are some of the reasons that, or the things that the IRS, the state of Connecticut, look at to determine if they believe this to be a 1099 contractor or a W-2 employee. And a lot of times, people are found out to be what should have been the W-2 employee, and they were actually being treated as 1099 because they get injured on the job. So somebody gets injured on the job, they go to the hospital asks, what happened? How did you get injured? They always ask that because they want to know what insurance it was going to pay for this. And if they say, well, I was at work and this happened, okay, that's workers' compensation insurance, get us the workers' compensation information. And that's how they found out that there is no workers' compensation. So now, not only are they going to have to pay all the back taxes, the Medicaid, the Social Security, the fines, the penalties, unemployment taxes, now they go back to all of that devastation that happened when I talked about workers' compensation. They're going to be responsible for the medical care, the out-of-work benefits, the retraining, and all of that, in addition to the payroll tax problems that they're going to have. So those are basically the 5 areas I wanted to cover. Incorporate, don't break the corporate veil, which is part of the incorporation. Don't get caught without workers' compensation insurance. Make sure you do your quarterly taxes, especially payroll taxes and sales taxes. And check with Peter or somebody to make sure, if you have somebody you're treating as a 1099 independent contractor, that they really are a 1099 independent contractor. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Well, it's really great to have such a wonderful resource, professional knowledge right here in town, just down the street. So thank you, Ron, for that. I thought it was very informative, and look forward to. Actually, I'd like to follow up with you anyway. We'll have to chat after
Absolutely.
this. So I'd encourage other people to do the same thing. Set a time just to. Do you have a free consult type situation that you offer, or how does that work?
Yes. Well, generally. In an in-office consultation, we do free phone consultations. If somebody has an issue, has a question, just needs to know things general, we will talk to them. Sometimes 10, 15 minutes we'll talk on the phone, try to make sure that everybody understands what their options are, what the situation is. And then if they want to go through a more detailed consultation, then there is a charge for the in-office consultation.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you very much, Ron.
Any questions, or does anybody, was I incorrect, or was I?
You were right on.
Okay.
Yeah, don't fool around with the payroll or sales tax. I've seen
Yes.
many cases where people starting out small, and it ends up to be a very large number because of the tremendous penalties that
Yes.
they add in addition to the interest. And I would caution people that if you have a shortage of funds, pay your payroll taxes and your sales tax first. It is
Right.
better to let your income taxes go It's still bad, but it's not as bad, so.
Correct.
Jen, question?
Well, I know this is a business meeting for business owners and stuff, but what if you're a homeowner and you know, hire someone to do some independent contract work and stuff? I mean, clearly if I was gonna have somebody cut down some trees, I would not hire somebody who didn't have insurance.
Right.
So that I check, but I've got a disabled son and we hire someone who doesn't work for anybody else. She's independent caregiver. She only works part-time.
I think you
What's
are
the
responsible for
stipulation
even,
there?
maybe even payroll tax. You have to, I think you.
Because we didn't think we didn't even think about payroll tax at all.
Isn't there something as
Workman's
home
comp
health
crossed my
people, or
mind.
even like if you had somebody coming in to, not a hiring a service, but if you had a private maid or somebody, you know, working at your house, I think you're responsible for those insurances.
The, you know, the homeowners would cover if you were liable for, you know, if it wasn't your fault, you know, like an accident happened.
Right, but if she
there's
got
the
hurt
consequence of her
caring for
work,
my son,
exactly.
that's the part
Um,
I worry
I
about.
think-
But the payroll tax was,
You'd be better ultimately to, you know, go full circle on it, to follow the same path, which would be payroll and workers' comp and all that stuff.
right,
Um,
I'm gonna need
But as far as,
somebody's
you know,
card.
it's,
By the way, there are exemptions that are available, especially with respect to workers' comp for home workers. I don't know the rules offhand, but it's certainly something I can help you with. As far as whether she's an employee or not, most of the time they are treated as an employee. You really do. You should. There's a 20 point test that you should go through just to see whether or not she is. And then, you know, I mean, the safest thing, if you go through that test and you determine she's an employee, is actually put her on the payroll, believe it or not. Or to hopefully, maybe she can work for another company that will bill you, and then they'll take care of the payroll side of it. So it's, you know, it can result in some very severe problems that Ron has just indicated if in fact she is an employee and you haven't been treating her as an employee. Not any fault of your own, but unfortunately it's something to be very, very careful of, so.
Right.
Yeah, I
Something
think
to
it
think
falls
about.
into that category of things that we probably see a fair amount where people, you know, they don't want to the expense. I mean, it's obvious. I was just dealing the other day with a contractor who he doesn't have any employees, but there is a chance that he might have somebody help, like this kid that helped
Right.
in your situation, and these problems can happen.
Sounds like you gotta carry around a waiver. It's like, if you wanna help me today, I'm sorry, but you can't claim this on.
but
workers'
actually, there
comp.
is a waiver for where basically they're supposed to provide you with proof they have insurance. You can't waive their right to be uncovered by workers'
Yeah.
compensation. That can't be waived.
Oh,
People
that's too
can't
bad.
wait, even if they sign and say, I am an independent contractor, it means nothing to the state of Connecticut. Just, it's worthless, it's not something you can bring in and say, well, they waived it, you
Right.
can't.
And
The only people who can waive it are, to my knowledge, business owners. As a business owner, you know, we have our coverage for our employees, we can waive our own coverage.
Mhm.
But there's a special form you have to fill out, and you have to make sure it gets filed with workers' compensation in the state, and then but you can't waive anybody else's, an employee can't waive their.
And a lot of times it isn't just, you know, expense. A lot of times it is expense. They don't want to pay the expense. But a lot of times somebody opens a business, you know, even a young kid, you know, gets out of high school or college, decides I'm going to get some lawnmowers, I got a pickup truck, I'm going to start a landscaping business. He has no clue what he's supposed to do and what he's supposed to have. And there's, you know, unfortunately, maybe that's something that the chamber could do, is put on some kind of get some kind of a program together to help
Yeah. set up
new business owners to know what they should be doing.
Well, for crying out loud, if you're gonna ask the state for a license to have a business, you know, or whatever they do, you know, a permit to have, you know, a business number or whatever,
Right.
they should give you a checklist of, by the way, you're gonna need blah, 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 blah. I
but a
mean,
lot of
TMB does it, so.
You'd be surprised how many people don't even go to get the license.
Yes, they don't, they just start working.
I handle family law, so I know everyone's business about everything because I have to, and as we're going through the cases, you don't know how many, I go, you know, as I start to hear things that, you know, and I end up, I mean, he's involved in half my cases because I'm like, oh, you need to talk to Ron about that, we gotta get you in compliance, so we have to. But it's knowledge, it's not, like a lot of these, most of these cases aren't people willfully, you know, intentionally doing the wrong thing. They just You know, the most they could be accused of is being careless, you know, or being reckless because they didn't try to find out as much information as they could have. But a lot of it, they're just plain, they don't know they have to do these things. Especially if you're dealing with younger people.
So, I do have a quick question, and this may sound strange, but workers' comp on anybody who works for you, but as the owner yourself, you have no protection?
No. I don't think, I
You're
don't.
done,
You
you're done,
can
you get-
include
No, you
yourself.
can
Oh,
include
okay.
yourself.
Yeah, you can exclude
Wow.
yourself or include
Yeah,
yourself. in
business
that, yeah.
owners can choose to have themselves covered and then they'll pay more, or they can choose to exempt themselves out. But if you exempt yourself out and you get injured, then you're on your own.
I guess it depends on the type of work you do, how the risk is involved in that kind of work.
Yeah.
Or if you have a spouse that has, you know, good insurance and you're covered in their insurance, then you wouldn't worry about yourself as much if you had other health insurance.
But you never know
That would
in this
cover the
day and age
medical.
when they're gonna lose their job,
Yeah,
so.
but that wouldn't cover your out of work.
Yeah.
Wouldn't cover your lost
And you,
wages.
workers' comp, you go to the state of Connecticut, they don't have a checklist, they don't have a, make sure you cover A to Z?
Well, you can probably get one from the state of Connecticut, but you have to go find it. They're not giving it to you, you know. You don't know, sometimes you don't know what you're missing,
Right.
and you don't know what to ask for.
And then
I
it's
would
an
think the
aha,
Small
we
Business
got you.
Administration
Yes.
would
That's what I was
have
gonna
a
say, the Small
checklist,
Business
I'm sure, because they do have a lot of information. The Small
I
Business-
believe also the state of Connecticut, actually, when you apply for or you register your business, there's actually a PDF book, it's probably 30 or 40 pages, what you need to know about doing business in the state of Connecticut.
Yeah,
I'm pretty
they
sure
do
that's
have-
what it
There
is.
is information out there, you just
Yeah,
have to
you have
get it,
to find
and you
it,
have to
you do have
read
to
it.
find it, and read it.
But also I would assume that the insurance companies that you're getting, you know, they would probably be a resource too.
Say it
Yeah,
again?
well, the insurance agent would have.
Insurance agent would be able
I think
to, they
that
should
the-
know that 20 checklist.
The takeaway would be, agreed, it would be that, talk to the professionals like Ron, insurance
Yeah,
agent,
the-
financial
There's
planner, you
people
know,
who have the information.
CPA, of course, and, you know, like, you get free, 10, 15 minutes on the phone, probably resolve most of the questions.
Yeah, that easily you would resolve at least what you need to do. Then if you need help doing it, that's usually where we need to go further. But you should always, even if it costs you, you should always consult, whether it's with an insurance agent, a CPA, if you're gonna start some new venture, find out, is there anything else I need to know before doing this? It's worth it. Even if you're spending some money to have those consultations, it can save you a fortune in the end.
Yeah, definitely. Any other questions?
Is there any minimum number of hours that then requires that kind of compensation? If someone comes and helps you out for an hour and then one afternoon?
Well, that poor landscaper guy, he was only with him for a couple hours that morning before he got injured, and so it doesn't, I don't
I
think so.
almost brought up while you were speaking, I didn't
That's
interrupt
okay.
you.
You could have, that's.
Was, there is an if-any policy, a workers' comp if-any policy, so there's a baseline, usually it's like $1,250, which is expensive. But if there is an employee for an hour, a couple hours, they'll be covered under that. Now, there may be an audit at the end of the year, how many hours were there, and you pay premium for that. But that's the catch-all, you know, look, these industries, obviously law, insurance has been around for so many years that these things are all considered. They got it all figured out. It's just people need to, read a little bit, talk to professionals to find out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you have anything you want to hand out, or?
Yeah.
You had- I thought I
I just,
Okay, so Ron will be back in a moment, but please
it's
grab
just a little
this card.
postcard that gives some of our contact information, and a picture of our house, but, but everything we do is kind of, you have this.
I got your number.
Yes, you got it. You may have that, Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you, Ron. It's great to have Ron and Kathy on the chamber team, and part of member of the Chamber of Commerce. And we encourage anybody else who's not a member to please become a member. I didn't get a schedule of our next events, but I do want to make an announcement about, or give Jen Rogers a chance to talk a little bit about the film festival that's coming up. If you have about a minute or so